Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, members of the public watching on our YouTube channel. This is Derbyshire District Council Planning Committee. A bit of housekeeping before I get on with the committee. Please, members, can you mute your microphones, only turn them on when you're asked to speak and promptly turn them off again, because there has been something that happened last night at the council meeting that I don't want to happen in this committee meeting. For those of you who are joining us for public participation, the same applies to you. Only turn your microphone on when you're speaking and turn it off immediately after. And if we are interrupted during debate, I have got the option of removing you from the committee, which I wouldn't want to do. So please be aware of the rules. So anyway, thank you very much, everybody. First thing we'll do is do a roll call. So Jason, if you'd like to do the roll call.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Archer.
Here.
Councillor Atkin.
Here.
Councillor Bright.
Here.
Councillor Ball.
Here.
Councillor Burfoot.
Here.
Councillor Buttle.
Here.
Councillor Donnelly.
Here.
Councillor Elliott.
Here.
Councillor Fitzherbert.
Here.
Councillor Lees.
Here.
Councillor Purdy.
Here.
Councillor Ratcliffe.
Here.
And Councillor Slack.
Here.
Everyone here, Chair.
Thank you very much. So we'll get on with the agenda tonight. So item 1 is apologies and substitute. Councillor Joyce Pawley has given her apologies, and it's nice to see Councillor Mike Ratcliffe sitting at this planning meeting, because I know Mike hasn't sat at the planning for such a long time. So it's nice to see you back at the planning meeting, Mike. So thank you. So we move on to item 2, which is approval of the minutes of the previous minutes for the 13th. Councillor Donnelly, would you like to move them?
I'll move those minutes.
Second.
I'll do that.
Please, all those in favour, just show hands. Thank you very much. Item 3, interest. I've had none tabled. I don't know where anybody's got any from the floor. No, I'll take that as no then. Right, so moving swift. Pardon? Was somebody going to declare an interest then, I heard? No? I'll move on then. So item 4, public participation. And we're going to now move to application for determination. So the first application we've got is application 5.1. It is number 19/001050, which is reserve matters, and I've got 3 speakers on this, so I'm going to introduce you one by one, and I'll tell you how long you've got left, and I'll indicate. I'll be told when you've got when you've done your 3 minutes. So the first person to speak on this application is a Mr. Martin Cuttledon, a local resident, to comment on the application. So, Mr. Cuttledon, over to you.
Thank you. Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm the owner of number 39 Starkholmes Road, and with that goes the ownership of the large part of Pump Close, including the junction. I've just got 2 points I'd like to make, both concerning Pump Close and its relation to this application. First, it's very much a matter of personal concern, and perhaps for that reason was not included or is not mentioned in the officer's report, officer's summary. But my garden, over a large part, is more than a metre below the level of Pump Close. It's retained by a dry stone wall, which has shown signs of bulging, and in the past 2 buttresses have been built to support it. But I fear that with the extra traffic on the road, in particular construction traffic, there is a very real risk of a major and costly collapse of Pump Close. The probably more general issue is the one of safety. The access from Pump Close onto Starkholmes Road has been an issue in the past, and particularly an issue which affected the decision to reject an earlier application to build on this site. It's limited vision to traffic coming down the hill. The present application proposes to overcome this by building a splay together with a slight narrowing of Starkholmes Road itself. As soon as we heard of this, we drew the dimensions onto the road, and it concerns us that we think the splay introduces a completely new hazard in that everything except a very small car in turning left will have to go over the centre of the road onto the other carriageway. And given the speed and the limited visibility of cars coming down the hill, we think that's a real issue. Finally, I'd like to remind the committee that the residents did seek legal advice. They received council's opinion that the application has that the applicant has no preferential or permissive right to alter the geometry of Pump Close, nor any right to modify it in any way. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cruttenden. The next speaker I have on my list is Mr. Richard Shacklady, who's going to use the same machine as Mr. Cruttenden. You've got 3 minutes, and I'll indicate when you've got 30 seconds left. So over to you.
Right. Good evening. We strongly object to this reserve matters application, in particular to the location of plots 6 and 7, which are sited adjacent to our boundary. On plot 7, it is proposed to build up the ground level on the north side such that the dwelling floor level is some 2 metres above the first floor level in our house. Plot level overlooks all our front garden and all our south and east facing rooms. These rooms include our lounge, which has an east facing patio door and 2 picture windows to enjoy the view. A main east facing bedroom and both first floor bathrooms are also overlooked. Plot 6 looks straight into our patio lounge window and the main bedroom, as well as all the rear of our house and back garden. The 2 proposed dwellings mean we lose most of our hillside views and also all of our privacy. We now note that the developer proposes to build a bin store which requires to accommodate 10 refuse bins plus 5 caddies. This store is being proposed to be located directly next to our beach edge and over the roots of a well-established tree in our front garden. These proposals are not acceptable to my wife and myself. If, as suggested, these dwellings are targeted at elderly people, why are there some 7 steps up to plot 7's main house door and no ramp? And why are elderly people in plots 4, 5 and 6 being made to bring bins up a steep incline to a bin store? And finally, why should house numbers 43, 53 and plots 6 and 7 overlook a bin store which has never been there? Dealing with the field, the latest Witcher survey is erroneous and misleading on many counts. All of the hedges and trees along the western edge of the site are inside the boundaries of numbers 53, 43 and 37. The northern boundary to the site is the stream that runs from the northeast corner downhill to the northwest corner. The trees referenced as common lime are in fact not common lime but common willow and grew in the field after the field owner's family dumped rubble and waste up to 1 metre deep in the lower part of the field. The eastern boundary line follows a ditch, part of which contains flowing water, and most of the trees along it are in the farm field. There are 4 Lombardy poplars along the eastern boundary, 3 of which are over 40 feet high. As per a Derbyshire Wildlife Trust report, bats do roost at 50.
You have 30 seconds left, Mr. Shacklady.
Less than 100 metres from the site, and they feed in the field. In summary, we consider this to be an opportunistic and ill-considered application. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shacklady. I had got a third speaker, Mr. Simon Edwards. I'll just ask our Democratic Services Manager if he's managed to locate him and if he's in the room or waiting. So if you can just see if they've come in, Jason, or in the waiting room.
I can't see that they're in the waiting room or the lobby chair.
Right, okay, thank you very much then. So moving on, we'll now get the officer to present the item. So now I'll hand over to John. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Chair. Just bear with me a moment while I get the presentation up for you to see. hopefully you've now got a screen.
No, it's not been shared, John,
Bear with me a moment.
fortunately.
Okay, try again.
Ah, there we go.
Okay. Right, I'll just go through the screen if I may. Right, just going through the images that we have. You can see here the site of the application. We've got the access through Pump Close. One of the speakers has already explained to you the relationship of the outline permission to this. We've had the details of the access to this site approved on the previous outline permission, which involves some building out of the footway at the point of access to achieve the necessary visibility splays. And as we go into the site, it's a regular shaped site. As you can see, we've got properties on the western side of the development, existing dwellings. We've got an open boundary, a largely open boundary on the southern side. We come close to the boundary with number 73 there. We've got an existing farm group on the eastern side, and dwellings beyond woodland to the north. In terms of the form of the development, it's a continuation of Pump Close as a cul-de-sac. It brings it to a turning head, and we've got 2-bedroom bungalows arranged around that turning head. As explained in the officer report, there are slopes within this site. There's a slope down from the south to the northwest of the site, and so the properties to the northwest of the site do sit at a lower level than the site itself, but there's quite a strong hedge feature that divides the two. In terms of other features, we've got an attractive oak tree in the southeastern corner of the site. The trees groups that have been referred to run up the eastern boundary, with trees also in the to the north of the development, and also we've got reference within the body of the report to drainage features that run across the site. There is a watercourse that exits at the northwest corner of the site to go down, eventually join Bentley Brook and the River Derwent, and some of the representations have made reference to that particular feature. In terms of the form of the dwellings, they're single story, to be built in stone with a slate roof. A contemporary twist to them, but relatively attractive. The fact that they're all bungalows does help to minimise any sense of overbearing on neighbouring properties, particularly those sat at a lower level. All of the properties have garages, as you saw in that plan. I'll just show you some of the views of the site. I mean, some members who've been on committee for quite some time will remember having visited this site in the past. So this is the view as you look into the site, as you come to the top of Pump Close, and that's the rather attractive oak tree that sits just beyond the site boundary. Part of the design of the layout seeks to retain a sense of that tree through a gap over the bungalows, so it will still be a feature that you can appreciate. These are the poplar trees that one of the speakers referred to running down the eastern boundary, and you get a feel within that image both for the wet nature of the centre of the site and also its sloping nature from south down to northwest. Mentioned the boundary with the immediate neighbours. Mr. Shacklady that spoke lives in the property here on the left hand side. This is the beech hedge that defines his boundary, and the site obviously sits at a slightly higher level. This is looking back up to the south of the site and to the hedge that sits beyond the site boundary. That's another image of Mr. Shacklady's property. This is looking back down Pump Close, and you'll see Pump Close has dwellings built at various times over the years. Okay. Bear with me a moment while I just stop the share on that. Okay. I don't know whether members can still see
It's
the
still
image.
there. It's still
Still
there,
there.
John.
Bear with me a moment. All right, I found it. Okay. Right. So just coming on to some of the points that were raised by the public in their representations that we listened to. Conscious that the first speaker, Mr. Cruttenden, made a number of points. He referred to concerns that he has over the stability of a boundary wall to his property. I think the advice that I would give members on that particular issue, that is not a key planning consideration in the assessment of this case. But obviously I would advise Mr. Cruttenden to record the condition of the wall before any development commences, and to share that information with the developer, so there's an agreement as to the state it's in. And obviously if there is any deterioration during the development process, there would be a reference point to come back to. Mr. Cruttenden also raised points around safety in terms of how safe it is as you come out of the access, and the potential for vehicles to have to go onto the other side of the carriageway. I think what I would say to members on that particular point is, you are considering a reserve matters application in this instance. The highway design has already been considered by the Highway Authority and was deemed to be safe as part of considering the outline application. So I don't think that's something you should look to revisit when all you're considering as part of this application are those reserve matters of layout, design, landscaping and the like. You heard from Mr. Shacklady concerns expressed around how the properties sit above his property and would cause overlooking. It's inevitable whatever you build on this particular site, it will be at a higher level than those properties that sit to the northwest. We think, however, as officers, that the layout that's been presented to us is an acceptable one. By limiting the properties to bungalows, the impacts are minimised. The windows are sensitively located so as not to be unduly overlooking of the property next door, but there will be a sense of, I'm sure, change and a degree of overlooking caused by carrying out this project. But we think that the layout is a sensitive one in that regard. I noted also concern around the location of the bin store. If members have read the late representations on this particular item, you will see that there's quite extensive correspondence on the issue of emptying the bins for this particular development. The council officers have confirmed that vehicles already reverse up pump close to empty bins, so they would be happy to pick up bins from the site entrance. The bin store sits within the site. It's relatively close to Mr. Shacklady's property, but the intention is not that bins are stored there on a permanent basis, but are sited there on the day when bins are to be collected and emptied. So all things being equal, we think that's an acceptable relationship. We note the comments around trees and ecology. Relatively late in the day, the applicants commissioned an updated ecology survey of the site. That survey did not generate any particular concern about ecological interests, and on that basis, we think the scheme is safe to proceed without harming ecology. Happy to take member questions.
Thank you, John. First on my list is Councillor Slack.
Thank you, Chair. Water seems to be a big issue on this site, John. There's talk of drainage not being adequate, and also a spring which is on the site. Can you enlighten me on what is the spring a problem, or can it be made a feature probably of this site?
Yes, Councillor, there is, if you'd had a chance to visit this site today, you would have noted that the middle of the site is wet, and when you go to the northwest of the site, there is flowing water coming out of the site. In terms of can we deal with that? Yes, we can. The applicants have commissioned somebody to come up with a drainage strategy. We don't have the final details of that strategy yet, and it's clearly been raised with the lead local flood authority that we need to be aware of any impacts that may be caused to neighbours. But when we have an outline permission and a reserve matters approval, things like the drainage strategy get conditioned as part of the outline permission. So we're going to have a dual process here of both, if we support this scheme, of discharging conditions on the reserve matters scheme, whilst also still dealing with the conditions on the outline scheme, and the drainage is one of those outline conditions that we will give full consideration in due course.
Thank you, John.
Thank you very much, Councillor Slack. Councillor Ratcliffe.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and it's good to be back, can I say?
Nice to meet you.
I've remarked before earlier, this is one of the applications that I considered back in 2016. So I'm slightly surprised that we're still dealing with it. I would have expected it to have gone forward, as it were. Those civil matters that you mentioned were very much a focus of attention back then. And again, I would have expected these to have been either resolved in favour of the objectors or have been dismissed to allow the applicant to go ahead. That's just a comment. My two questions, if I may. First of all, is a great deal has happened since 2016 when outline approval was given, not least of which is the increased traffic around Matlock. And I know from experience now that Starkholmes has increasing use as a route from Matlock to Cromford, the A6 and Wirksworth. I don't see any great detail from the highways to acknowledge that. That's a question. The traffic, the vehicles that will emerge from Pump Close to either go off to the left or to the right, again, don't seem to be considered an increase that is of concern. So I just wanted to ask John, first of all, has there been any additional information coming back from highways about Starkholmes and this particular site being subject to increased vehicle use?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Ratcliffe. Happy to clarify that point. I think you make an interesting point. It's good chance for me to explain the relationship between the outline permission and the reserve matters. The outline permission is the planning permission. Overall vehicle volumes are a matter that should be considered at the time you grant outline permission, and not matters that should generally be considered pertinent when you're considering the reserve matters. So the outline permission would have allowed, in theory, up to 9 dwellings. Now, when we've worked through the detail of this, I think we've both come to realise, both the applicants and the local planning authority, that 7 is a comfortable number on this site. So actually 7 2-bedroom bungalows is less traffic than was originally envisaged when this was granted outline permission, and it wasn't considered that the amount of additional traffic was material at the time that that outline permission was granted.
Yeah. My second question is perhaps a little bit more general, and it's really to do with current concerns, as it were, about concerning the council, our policies and strategic direction. And you'll forgive me for raising this straight away. I don't see anything within this application, and perhaps you'll tell me there's no reason why there should be anything, but nothing about our intentions to advance a climate change strategy. Where is the energy saving designs here? Where are the renewable energy measures invested into this? Was there no consideration by planners to say, you know, it would be good to see something like this emerging? You know, we have to start somewhere, don't we, in planning? Can't leave it to the government, as we're discovering to our cost with these white paper proposals. So I'm sorry to make that comment, but I'd like just to hear your view, John.
Yeah. I think it comes back to what I've said before about the relationship between the outline permission and the reserve matters. If we're going to place a policy requirement on applicants to achieve a particular format or standard of design in terms of climate change, those conditions really need to be put in place in the outline permission. Now, we can take some account of, you know, the supplementary guidance as and when it emerges in influencing some of these larger developments, but my view would be that that isn't far enough down the line yet. It's still in an early draft stage to warrant any great weight in the consideration of this particular scheme. But we will be introducing that obviously over the coming months.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ratcliffe. Councillor Burfoot.
Thank you, Chair. I have got a few questions. I'd like to know a little bit more about this bin store. It doesn't seem very clear as to whether this bin store is for 5 bins or 10 bins. Could you just clarify that for me?
It's a bin store that is designed to accommodate the bins that will be collected on any one particular day. I wouldn't claim to be an expert on the council's policies on when bins are collected, but if you know you've got the properties within the development, if there's a proposal to collect recycled materials on any one day, I'd expect the recycled material bins to be put out on that bin store. Likewise, if it's another form of waste on a particular day or a particular week, the bins for that particular purpose would be stored in that area.
So
it would be put back to the property address.
On that basis, when I was looking at the site plan and the plans on the portal, it would appear that there was room for 5 bins. Now you say about 5 properties on any one day. When the collection is done, there could be 10 bins. So is the bin store site, capable of taking 10 bins? That's my basic question, because if not, where will these other bins go?
Just bear with me a moment, Councillor. Yeah, I was just checking as to where we stood in terms of the conditions on the outline permission. So what you've got here is you've both got a layout which suggests an area for storing bins, and I agree with you. It probably doesn't look capable of accommodating 10 bins. But you've also got a condition on the outline permission, condition 8, that requires that detail to be approved in any event. So if members were minded to support the officer recommendation on this scheme, notwithstanding the fact that there's a bin store identified on the submitted layout, any bin store would need to satisfy condition 8 and be adequate for purpose.
If I may, Chair, that's not really the answer I was looking for, in that, you know, it could be considered that this is, we're being premature in deciding this tonight. It would appear that this might be one of several things that haven't been finalised, and not having listened to the debate, I'm certainly not really happy with that answer. 10 bins outside somebody's hedge is in a bin store that can only take 5. Sounds to me like it's going to be a problem, to say the least. The next question is about, no, I can't remember exactly what we call it. It's when the county council do have a look at the turning circles. Now, as far as I understood it, I don't know whether I'm right or not, but I thought at the outline permission stage, the county council said that they insist that refuge vehicles are able to turn within the development and leave and exit it in a forward gear. So is this true at the moment? Can they go, can they enter the site and leave in a forward gear? And is that something that the county council have now decided not to enforce when we're looking at planning applications?
Bear with me, councillor. I'm just reviewing the conditions that were attached to the outline permission. I think you're referring to requirements of condition 7 on the outline permission. It says no dwelling shall be occupied until details of the proposed parking and manoeuvring areas within the site have been submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority. These facilities shall thereafter be retained for use at all times. We are in the hands of the local highway authority in assessing the current layout in terms of whether the details are adequate. And they have suggested that they are comfortable with what's proposed in terms of vehicle manoeuvring facilities.
And the final question, I apologise if I didn't catch what John said earlier, but our landscape officer requested an arboricultural protection plan. Has one been submitted, and if not, why not? And why haven't we asked for one?
Just bear with me while I just check the recommendation in terms of what conditions are proposed. I've been to look at this site, and I'm familiar with it historically in terms of what the likely impact would be on trees, and I was satisfied that there were no significant direct impacts. Just checking the conditions to see whether we've covered tree protection as part of one of the conditions. Yeah, so under condition 11 on page 13, there is a requirement to put in adequate protection and carry out the scheme in accordance with the original constraints report. So I think we've got that point covered, councillor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Burfoot. The next on my list is Councillor Fitzherbert.
Thank you very much, Chairman. My real question is about the length of time that this has taken. I know you've said there are various legal and other matters sort of involved in order to get this, but if you look on page 4 of our agenda, it did say the determination target was the 3rd of December 2019. And I know since obviously we've had COVID and all the problems with the pandemic. I really want to know, are all, you know, I'm a bit worried that the two speakers mentioned other matters, you know, about, you know, drops and things like that and what will happen. Are to the best of your knowledge, John, are all these matters resolved? Because I believe, presumably, you've had lots of talks and discussions about this. over this period? That's really my question. Thank you.
Yeah, I think the answer to that one is fairly straightforward. I mean, what happened in relation to this development is we had one developer taking it forward when it first came in as a reserve matter scheme. The property owner and that developer then parted ways, and the current applicant, Mr. Neville, took over the scheme, and we didn't see any reason why that couldn't occur, so long as the proposal stayed within the parameters of the outline permission. So there's almost been two series of negotiation over the merits of the layout, and that's one of the major reasons why the scheme has been somewhat delayed in coming to planning committee.
Okay, sorry if I may, Chairman. I understand, of course, all these. We have visited the site. Those of us have been on planning for a while now. I think a couple of times actually. So that's very interesting. That explains it for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next on my list is Councillor Sue Ball.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, well, I'm a bit concerned, as like Councillor Burford, as regards this store for the bins. I know you stated that we were supposed to be having a collection point for where they should be at the time of the day of picking up, but I'm a bit concerned that if it's there, whether it be the right size, as Councillor Burford's made out the point, but will they actually stay there all the time? Of people going to actually be taking them back and forth? Are we going to be on the guarantee that will be moved? Because there'll be nothing worse than against somebody else's boundary that there is a storage of waste all the time, and I wouldn't have thought that was satisfactory. And I would have thought, in another aspect, if it's on a incline, as we saw part of it is, are the people there being able to move the bins back and forth, or is it not feasible to make a turning circle or an access so that the vehicle can go in and take it off the curbside from each dwelling, as was and as is at every other area? I just wondered, because I'm just concerned who will actually enforce that those bins are moved back to each property each time. That's the thing, because I can't see. I think it'll be a case that they'll be left, and I'm a bit concerned to that knowledge that would happen.
Thank you, Councillor Bull. I think the reality of it is, if you put out your bin for collection on the day when it's due to be collected, you would have an interest as a resident of one of these units to then return it to wherever you store the bin outside your property, because otherwise, every time you had some waste, be it recycling or other waste, you've got to walk all the way down the cul-de-sac to go and put it in a bin. So I think it's very unlikely that people would leave their bins at the end of the cul-de-sac. It would be completely contrary to common sense to do so. I think it will police itself. I don't have any particular concerns over that. I think the Highway Authority are rightly exercising a degree of flexibility in terms of the highway standards they require for what is a very modest cul-de-sac. Yes, you could argue that we should always have a full bin lorry turning facility at the end of every cul-de-sac, but that's very land hungry and really quite unnecessary in my opinion.
Okay, John, just something for you. Is it something that we could condition the usage of this bin store?
I think whenever you seek to impose a condition, you need to consider whether any condition that you impose is enforceable. So I think seeking to enforce on individual residents that they, take their bin back to the property within a specified time period, I think that's really stretching a point in terms of a practical condition. As I say, we've got sort of dual control over this. The area where the bin store is going to be has been identified on the plans. There's still an opportunity to revisit whether it's exactly the right size or not in terms of discharging condition 8 on the outline permission. So I think we've got it covered.
Okay, thanks for the clarification on that. I've got two more speakers down for questions. So first is Councillor Purdy.
Well, you've taken the words out of my mouth, thank you, Chairman. So John's answered my point.
Thank you very much, Councillor Purdy. Councillor Buckle.
Yeah, I looked at the swept path analysis for this, and I wondered where visitors are going to park. It looked tricky. It looked like you'd be able to have your food delivered by Tesco's or whatever, but they'd not get back out again if somebody had parked anywhere in that patch. There's a thing in this a statement here that says that the garages are 3 meters by 6 meters or something like that, or some number. And then it doesn't make it so clear to me whether or not we're counting that as a space for a car. So that's my first question. Do each of these houses have space for 2 cars to park?
Yes, they do, Councillor Butler. It is legitimate to consider the detached garages that are proposed for each unit to be one of the parking spaces available to that unit.
Yeah, so they actually have space for 1 car and a garage. So that, like, if they're like normal people and they put the freezer in it and what have you, there's possibly not. So can we ask for bigger garages? Or garages that are a bit longer? I don't know if we're allowed to do that sort of thing, but you know, if the garage was big enough so people could use it, that might help. And I had another question. It was to do with the flooding analysis and how things have changed with climate change, and whether or not the numbers for the analysis that's been produced by the Flood Authority have been changed after the flooding that happened 3 times in Matlock last year. Have they actually revised how they work out, whether or not the dealing with water is safe, and has that number been changed since this was laid out, since this planning application was passed in what have you, or has it been, you know, is it current and useful?
Well, at the time it was suggested that a condition was appropriate to deal with this issue when we granted it outline planning permission. So we will have to, with the cooperation of the lead local flood authority and technical advice being sought by the applicants, address that condition going forward.
So that means we're going to put a current, we're going to actually make sure on current information, including things that we've learned from the flooding. Was that a yes?
The site will have to be able to cope with the water demands that are placed upon it. That's the purpose of the condition.
Right. Okay. I think I've got you there. Yeah. And the last thing was Mr. Shacklady's overlookingness. I also have been and stood in this field, and I think if he lets his hedge grow up a little bit, it won't be quite so bad. And I think, although I can understand why he's upset, I think if he decides that it's just something he's got to live with, it won't be quite so aggravating. But I do understand his view entirely. And there we go.
Chair, you're on mute.
Sorry, we've now moved into debate. Anybody want to set debate off? Councillor Fitzherbert first.
Well, I'm happy to move it, Chairman. I think, although I'm not happy about 1 or 2 things that I'm sure will happen in the debate, but I'd like to get something on the floor so we can discuss this further, because this is reserved matters and it's been going on 3 or 4 years for the various reasons have been outlined, and it is in the local plan, I believe, and everything, so it ticks all those boxes. Yes, I'm afraid, I do hope that the 2 gentlemen that spoke earlier very eloquently, that their problems are resolved, but I don't think we can get in the way of this one, and I'd like to move it, please. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Fitzherbert. Councillor Purdy.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I'll second that. I'm a long-standing planning committee member, and yes, we have visited this site twice, and it's also near to me, so I'm very well aware of its location. It's always upsetting for neighbours when change takes place, and we understand that and sympathise with that. But I think we have to realise that given the fact that outline planning permission has already been given, then all we can deal with here is basically the tidying up of the detail. And I thank John and for his replies and his comprehensive answers, and I like to think that all the points are covered and all the points are covered in the conditions. So I'll second the motion, Chair, to approve.
Thank you very much, Councillor Birdie. Councillor Burfoot.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I'm very familiar with this site, and I was on the planning committee in 2016, and I did vote against the recommendation then, and things have changed actually since 2016, and not for the better. I'm very disappointed that the lead flood authority chose not to send in any comment, and I think for that reason alone we should well, I personally think that we should defer it again. Now, I don't think that will go down very well with members, but we all know about the history of flooding in Matlock, and there is evidence of properties in this vicinity being flooded, basements being flooded. And so the fact that the lead flood authority, Derbyshire County Council, chose not to make a comment is very disappointing, to say the least. I mean, the same reasons that I spoke of about probably in 2016 still stand, to be honest. Even 7 properties is too much for this inadequate road. The traffic issues in Starkholmes don't reduce, they get worse. I've tried to get the county council to take some measures to alleviate the problems, but nothing happens. So we've now got the possibility of up to 14 extra cars coming out onto this, what I consider to be an unsafe road. The question about the bins, that's not really been resolved, to be honest. And until we get some kind of proper explanation about that, I can't vote for this. Councillor Bull made a good point that you can't force people to move their bins. You can't force them to do that. And if it's more convenient for them to leave their bins in the bin store, which is probably not big enough, then we get an issue with I'm not sure what the word I'm looking for, but antisocial activity, if you like, with bins right next to somebody's hedge, and the possibility of 10 bins being there, and we don't seem to be doing anything about that. There are concerns about access on and off Pump Close, and I absolutely appreciate that they are civil matters, but there's still problems, and I do go along with the fact that there will be overlooking and there will be privacy problems. And at the end of the day, that's a matter of judgment. And my judgment is that that's not acceptable. So for all those reasons, I won't be voting for approval.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Burfoot. Councillor Slack.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm very undecided on this, as it was previously before, but now it's got outline permissions and so forth, and I'm concerned about the water problem, but John's answered that, in my opinion, correctly. So I'm just about coming down on the side of agreeing with the application, really. So,
Councillor, can you stop moving your head about, please? There's a lot of
sorry, I'm always doing that. I'm sorry, Jason. Keep your hands away.
Don't worry about it.
Yeah, so I'm just coming down on the side of agreeing with the application. So I'll second it if it hasn't been seconded.
It's already been seconded. Thank you very much.
I'll support you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Donnelly.
No, thank you, Chair. Yeah, well, I was going to second it because I was on the site visit in 2016 as well. And I think it's something that's sort of dragged on, but we've got to bear in mind to not just reserve matters we're talking about, not the outside application. So with respect to our neighbours, and I can understand their concerns, but unfortunately we've got to move on. So I'm happy to support the motion.
Thank you very much, Councillor Donnelly. Councillor Ball, and then we're going to go to the vote.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, well, I do feel that that some little areas as regards the bins need to be just looked into possibly a little bit more, and I hope John will probably work with the developer upon that. And I do see as regards the drainage, which we were all on about, and you did make points that that would be something that, and it was put in conditions on the outline planning. So again, hopefully that will all be kept and enforced upon, making sure that that side of it is done before any of the development does proceed, so we haven't got the flooding issue. Upon that, as we've said, it's reserved matters, and I don't really see any other point that we can object. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ball. Just got another couple of people. Oh, Councillor Buttle.
Yeah, great. I like the idea of bungalows. I think they're good. I don't know about Matlock, but certainly in the Peak District, we're massively short of bungalows. So I can see that bungalows are pretty fancy things. I'm all in favour. Where are people going to keep their bins? This is the thing, because you look at these plans and you think, well, where am I going to put my bin? And it looks like you can get down the side of 3 or 4 of them, and a couple of them they might have to go in your visitor car parking space. I think the bins thing is definitely a thing, isn't it? So can we ask for a larger space for the bins to be kept at the houses? You know, like, can they actually have like a little patch where they keep their bin? Is that the sort of thing that could be asked for? And I suppose that's a question. I should have asked that at the beginning, but is that, I'm sorry. Would that be possible though? Could I ask John whether or not we can actually have ask for somewhere to keep a bin actually at your house rather than at the bottom of the road?
John, do you want to come back on that?
Take that follow-up. I think most of the properties will have no problem in finding space for bins. I recognise it's an issue of member concern, but I mean, I know from where I live, people keep their bins in a multitude of places, and I just think sometimes the planning system needs to rein itself in terms of trying to micromanage such relatively modest issues in terms of where you put your bin outside your property. Just kind of take the opportunity as well, Chair, just to cover this issue of drainage again, because we have had comments from the Lead Local Flood Authority. They initially decided it wasn't a scale of development where they should comment on. They normally have a cut-off point of at least 10 dwellings, but having been contacted by local residents, they have provided comments, and that's on page 6 of the late representations that are presented to us. So we do have their comments. They are comfortable in principle with that being dealt with through discharging the condition, and the developer can work alongside the Lead Local Flood Authority to make sure the right information is supplied to them to help them discharge that.
Okay,
thank you very much, John. I'm sorry, you're absolutely right. I need to keep my nose out of where people keep their bins. Right, so thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Buttle. So it's been moved and seconded that the application be granted with conditions. So now we'll go to the vote, and I'll hand over to Jason.
Thank you, Chair. If members could indicate whether they're for, against or abstain. Councillor Archer.
Abstain.
Councillor Atkin.
For.
Councillor Bright.
For.
Councillor Bull.
For.
Councillor Burfoot.
Against.
Councillor Buttle.
For.
Councillor Donnelly.
For.
Councillor Elliott.
For.
Councillor Fitzherbert.
For.
Councillor Lees.
For.
Councillor Purdy,
4.
Councillor Ratcliffe,
4.
and Councillor Slack.
4.
11 for, 1 against, and 1 abstention, Chair.
So that has been granted. Thank you very much. Moving swiftly on, application 5.2, which is application number 20/005774. This is land west of Wyaston Road, Ashbourne. It's for the erection of a temporary agricultural workers dwelling. And we have one speaker on this, and this is the applicant, Miss Natasha Kay. So, Natasha, are you ready? Hello? Miss Kay?
Hello?
If you'd like to turn your camera on as well.
Yeah, on.
You have 5 minutes, and I'll indicate when you have 30 seconds left. Okay, so the floor's all yours, Natasha. Thank you.
Many thanks for the opportunity to speak in support of my application. As you will see from your officer's report, we have worked incredibly hard to create a thriving and sustainable business on the land at Wyaston Road. This business has been my life for 18 months and is my future. I've proven a need for an agricultural dwelling as agreed with your officers. My animals need an on-site presence and we are regularly losing piglets. In fact, yesterday I lost another 3, unfortunately. And my vets are becoming increasingly concerned that there is no site to provide 24-hour care. We have done everything that the officers have asked of us and have sought to jump through every hoop available, even after coming up with various solutions. Each time we have addressed the issues and a deal in hand comes back with a different argument. The officer's report is highly positive, with the exception of the highways. When we received the response of the Highway Authority, we were shocked. The access is an existing access. A farm building has been allowed by the authority utilising this access point, and the Highway Authority raised no concerns then. I personally travel to and from the site from my home in Cromford 4 times a day. This is not sustainable and results in 8 uses of the access point on a daily basis. This is 56 movements a week. I do this many trips to adequately care for my 80 sows, and anyone who is familiar with farrowing will understand the need for this many journeys. With accommodation on site, we anticipate leaving the site approximately 3 times a week, which would equate to 6 uses of the access owing to the labour requirements of the farm. And the fact that I also suffer from autism, and I do also have a borderline personality disorder, which means that I don't really have much of a social life other than my animals. So I just stay there. Whilst ad hoc journeys will be minimal owing to pressure of the farm, therefore it would be reasonable to add approximately 8 uses of the access per week. This gives a total of 14 vehicle movements associated with the domestic use. It is accepted that there will be a small number of farm vehicle movements this will be unchanged from existing, and in total all movements will be below the 56 that are currently undertaken. Me and my partner are not planning on having children. I don't want children, just for my own mental health. And this means that Adil's school visits and trips will be non-existent. These seem to be one of the main concerns that the Highway have expressed. Going back to the first and very basic principles, this is an existing access that has been in place since 1995, since Day 52 was completed, and is subject to significant use owing to the lawful operations on the land. These operations and the associated movements through the existing access point are not going to cease, and it's entirely nonsensical and without reason for the Highway Authority to consider a proposal that will reduce vehicle movements through the access as unacceptable. As you will note, the application is temporary for 3 years to enable the authority to consider whether the business is profitable before committing to a permanent dwelling. In these 3 years, accident data will be collected. If over this period highway safety concerns are raised, then these will be logged and can be considered as part of any future application for a permanent dwelling. We will also happily commit to widening the access, installing concealed entrance signs and visibility mirrors, and we have also removed loads of vegetation. My partner is a civil engineer and also holds NRSWA supervisor qualification, so this would be easily achieved. There are numerous access points along Wyaston Road which are far worse than ours, and driving in and around Ashbourne, it actually sometimes reduces me to tears to see how bad their accesses are, but they're allowed. Me and my partner are both very young, and we have worked hard to get everything set up, and it has cost us a lot of money, and we can't believe how unfairly this is being dealt with due to the highways officer, who appears to be doing everything in his power to stop us. The farm is my life. It is incredibly important to my mental health and has enabled me to engage in a highly successful and growing business which is built on strong and sustainable foundations. Without accommodation, on-site animal welfare is being significantly compromised. This cannot be allowed to continue. All I want to do is be able to run my business and care for the animals. Please, please support me in this endeavour.
You have 30 seconds left.
I've finished now.
Okay, thank you very much. So now I'm
Thank
going to hand
you.
over. Thank you. So now I'm going to hand over, because this is one of John's again. So John, if you want to introduce.
Thank you, Chair. Hopefully you can see the introduction slide for this particular item.
Yeah, it's there, John.
I'll just go through this, if I may. Okay. In terms of the application site, you can see here this is Wyaston Road coming south out of Ashbourne. For those that know the area, you pass under the Ashbourne bypass, and this road then goes steeply uphill, leading to the access on your left-hand side there to the bowls club and golf course at Ashbourne. So the application site that's hatched is the route of the access road and the associated location of the temporary dwelling, but the applicant farms on this particular field at this location in association also with other land elsewhere. Okay, so there you can see the extent of the land holding at this particular site, but there's other land that is under lease and rented that supplements this. And you can see here we've got a site plan showing the point of access just to the south of the bridge for the Ashbourne bypass, and it leads down into the site. We've got existing buildings on the site, and we've got the proposed temporary dwelling. Just if you haven't picked up on this in the report, the agricultural buildings on the site were approved under an agricultural prior notification procedure. Now what happens with those is we have to look at the likely impacts of those. At the time that the building was described as an agricultural storage building, we saw no reason to resist that in terms of the fact that the land could be farmed in any event, and the storage building is a reasonable building in association with that activity. Okay. This is a plan which shows the point of access and the potential to create visibility splays. Here's an image of typical image of the temporary unit that's going to be created. There's the end elevations of it. And you can see that we've got basically a 2-bedroom temporary unit with farm office, bathroom, kitchen, diner and utility and boot room. site photograph plan. If you just come onto the photographs themselves. So photograph number 1 is just through the gates and looking into the site. This is the agricultural storage building that was erected under the prior notification. You'll note from the applicant's submission that they keep a range of different types of animals in different places, but it's important to say that some of the structures associated with keeping those animals are not something that require planning permission. So to create pig arks and move those around a field is not something that actually requires our permission. There's a picture of the land. And a picture of the interior of the building with associated agricultural storage. Another image of the building and the land outside at the hard standing. Then we've got, this is a photograph of the point of access, looking up the hill in a southerly direction. And this is the next image is looking back in a northerly direction towards Ashbourne, and you'll see that the bridge is an insurmountable obstacle in that direction that limits the visibility. This is looking down the hill, down Wyaston Road from the outskirts of Ashbourne. Another image as you go down the hill. And that's that for the slideshow, Chair. There was only one point actually in terms of the case that's been made by the applicant that I wanted to come back on. She gave a very detailed explanation as to how the business currently operates and where she lives and how many vehicle movements are associated with that. There's clearly a difference of opinion with the local highway authority, who have concerns about visibility at that point of access. The speeds in both directions are roughly 40 miles an hour, so it is quite a fast-moving section of road. The only point I really wanted to come back on is in terms of whether the authority can reasonably just have regard to the applicant's current agricultural business, because from my perspective, if you grant permission tonight, you're granting a permission for an agricultural workers dwelling, and you will set a precedent in doing that for the subsequent consideration of a permanent dwelling down the line, assuming the business develops as proposed. Now, whilst Natasha may have no intention to ever move from this site, and her personal circumstances, may suggest that the vehicle movements that she would encounter here are significantly lower than will be significantly lower than they currently are. Once that site has permission for a permanent agricultural worker to live there, then we would be able to exercise no control over the personal habits and lifestyle of that future worker. And I think where the Highway Authority are coming from on this are that they're working from that base, that typically an agricultural worker would have more vehicle movements associated with living on a site than they would from visiting the site in the way suggested. A future agricultural worker could have children, could have a much more busy social life in terms of leaving the site to go to any number of places, and I think that's the base that they're working from. And having visited the site myself, visibility is severely restricted, and it's well below the standards that the Highway Authority would normally look for. Happy to take member questions.
Thank you very much, John. The first on my list is Councillor Purdy.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, John. It's a shame that we can't approve this for the reasons Natasha's given, but as we know, long-standing members on planning, we go against highways at our peril. But I'm a bit confused, .com, in that there's already vehicle access on there. And am I right in thinking that there is no objection previously? I think Natasha intimated that. So can you help me with that? And so why has highways changed their tune now?
Yeah, I think there has been. It's an agricultural field. And there is an access to that field. I mean, that's true for almost every field that has a road frontage within the district, that they will have a gated access. Typically, those agricultural fields generate relatively low volumes of vehicular traffic, whether it's, you know, the growing cereals in there, you're in a few times of the year to plant and harvest and plough, etc. Most animal rearing activities on land, keeping cattle or keeping sheep, generate relatively few vehicle movements. It just so happens that the way the applicant is using the site is much more intensive. That's her choice, but she's rearing pigs, and she's got chickens, and she's got a number of activities on the site that generate the need for much more frequent activity. So I think that there's a subtle difference there between what would typically be associated with an agricultural access into a field of this scale and how often people would use it, and the intensity of the use that's arisen and would be proposed.
May I just come back to you?
Yeah, of course you can.
I mean, I know the entrance because we regularly went up that route, of course, to the last planning venue, the venue. Is there not any chance at all, Natasha has suggested again, that entrance could be improved?
Considering the geometry of the access and the constraints that apply, if you're looking back in a southerly direction towards Ashbourne, the obstacle that prevents you improving visibility is the bridge to the bypass. So that I see as an immovable constraint, I'm afraid. In terms of the road that stretches down to the south, the road goes up steeply and also goes around a corner. So it might be possible if Natasha was to gain control over the road frontage for a stretch of that road to improve it to some degree, but the way the road sweeps up and curves around makes that quite difficult, and we've not been presented with a plan that demonstrates that can be done.
Okay, thank you, John. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Lees.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm just a bit puzzled myself on the application, because the land which the temporary dwelling is going to be, or the applications for, is only sat in 5 acres of land. So I see this as quite an increase in traffic moving in and out of this site, with the size, well, what's specified in point 2.4 of the amount of animals that's going to be housed in that area and the surrounding other land that Natasha's got, whether it be close or not. And if that's where she's going to live, obviously I can see it as they're going to be bringing more animals into that site to look after them, because they're their home. So I think there'll be more traffic generated, and I can't see that 5 acres is enough to sustain that amount of animals. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Archer.
Thank you, Chair. Really difficult one, this, because you want to support the business, but it is a difficult access road. But I mean, are there any other options? I know this is more of a highways question, but in terms of traffic calming, I often think when I drive down that road, which I know very well, that it's actually not the best to drive down anyway. It's a steep dip, and the visibility isn't great going around the corner. and there's increased levels of traffic along there already because of the significant new development that's been built, and that on that side of the town, it's becoming a more frequently used road. Is there not any way that there could be traffic calming measures put on to limit the speed of the traffic going down the road, to enable the access to be safer? And just a second question, which is half addressed already. We already mentioned it sets a precedent for someone else in the future who could use it just as a domestic dwelling rather than as a farm labourers or farm managers building. Could it also set a precedent for other domestic dwellings and buildings, houses to be built on that site as well, if we were to approve this one and then it became permanent later? Thank you.
Yeah, in terms of whether the locality has the possibility of traffic calming, that's another question I would need to put to the highway authority to seek an opinion. It's not something that's proposed as part of this particular application, so we are stuck with making a decision based on what we've observed as the 85 percentile speed measurements on this particular site. The point I was making about occupancy was just reflecting on what Natasha said about how she lives and how she perceives that moving onto this site would actually reduce traffic movements. The point I was trying to make was that once we've approved an agricultural workers dwelling on this site to serve an agricultural operation in the area, we have no particular control over the individual habits of the future occupants of that. Now, Natasha may live there for the rest of her life, but equally, somebody else may take on the holding, in 10, 15, 20 years time, who uses the vehicle a lot more to get out and about around Ashbourne, take children to school, do the shopping, all of the things that you might typically expect. So you're looking at not necessarily just the traffic movements that are being presented, but I think the Highway Authority were trying to reflect on more typical traffic movements that might be associated with a dwelling on the site. In terms of whether it would set a precedent for new housing on that parcel of land, I don't think there's any prospect of that, in the foreseeable future. In terms of the expansion of Ashbourne, it sits out beyond the line of the bypass. I would hope we'd consider lots of other sites for residential development before we had to consider that one for general housing in the future. So hopefully that provides some reassurance.
Okay, thank you. The next on my list is Councillor Burford.
Thank you, Chair. I've got two questions. Could I just ask, first of all, as a planning committee, should we always make our decisions based on recommendations from Derbyshire County Council? Can we not include other things that are down for consideration? That's the first question. And just a question about temporary becoming permanent. If we were minded tonight to approve this on a temporary basis for 3 years, that wouldn't necessarily mean that in 3 years' time it would become permanent. It would be another planning application, surely. And as far as, well, I know that Derbyshire County Council highways seem to do everything on statistics. So if in 3 years' time they would presumably have got statistics on how many accidents there were on that stretch of road that could then be looked at.
Happy to come back on those points, Councillor. You're not tied by the recommendations of the local highway authority, as we often say to you, and I think often as a committee you see more danger in highway safety often than the local highway authority do, because they are tied by the requirements of the NPPF in terms of the severity of the impact of a development. So I think it's fairly rare that you will get a recommendation as strong as this from the Highway Authority, where they're saying that this is severely substandard in terms of visibility and is unsafe. It's a pity we haven't been able to go out and visit this, but I reversed into the access of this site last week, and when you sat in your car, on the back edge of the highway, the visibility in either direction is really poor in my view, and I think it is a danger to highway safety.
Okay, does that answer your question, Councillor Burford? I'll take that as a yes. Councillor Fitzherbert.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I rather agree with all the other speakers, but my question is really because one of the consultees in the applicant's report is Sir Vets, McMurtry and Harding. And if you remember, ladies and gentlemen, a few years ago, we gave consent for McMurtry and Harding to build a new build with solar panels on the roof ahead of its time, Neil, I should tell you, in Ashbourne next to the Aldi there. And it only has a left turn out of it. So it goes on to the roundabout and people can go the other way. Now, I know there's no roundabout here, but has it not been explored that there should, if you come out of the access, there is just a left turn? That's my first question. Secondly, I was at the site today and I actually went in first because the gates were closed and everything. And I'd reversed back onto the highway. Now, it was 3:30, 3 o'clock, whatever it was. The schools were coming out. There were some vans coming quite quickly from the south going north. And I just think of the extra traffic that the works for the shed that's already been put up under permitted development and all the access that turned out, I do question the highway authorities' reckoning on this, although I do accept that we have to accept what they have said. But my question is, can there be just a left turn similar to the Murtry and Hardings, although I accept that is on the 515 going towards the sort of Sainsbury's home-based roundabout?
Yeah. I think if you just refer to page 23 in the officer agenda here, what it says at the top of the page under 7.12 is that the visibility in a southerly direction, i.e. allowing a left turn out of the access, should be 2.4 by 56 meters. Sorry, it should be 2.4 by 63 meters to the south of the access. What they can actually achieve is 2.4 by 35 meters. So it's just over half of the recommended visibility splay. The point being, I mean, people sometimes look at visibility splays and they assume that they are drawn to the centre of the highway. So if vehicles are going down the left-hand side of the road, going south out of Ashbourne, people assume that you can logically draw the visibility splays to that left-hand side of the road, the centre of the road and the left-hand side of the road. That's not the view of the local highway authority. You could have cyclists going on the left-hand side of the road and somebody travelling on the right-hand side of the road going down that hill. So they will always draw the visibility splay to the near side carriageway edge. So although if you took it to the centre, it's slightly more than that, 35 metres, it's still substandard. And, you know, I don't think just having a left turn actually solves the problem ultimately.
But if the applicant could buy a bit of extra land on the southern side, on her side, cut down all the trees and scrub out the hedge, that might be better.
Well, if it's a left-hand turn coming out of the access, the obstacle to visibility is the bridge.
Right. Okay.
So
Except you can't move.
Ultimately, is the thing that blocks the visibility. So
okay.
I think that's insurmountable, certainly as far as I'm aware.
Or the answer is a completely different access.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Fitzherbert. Councillor Ratcliffe.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think most of what I was interested in has been answered. I mean, clearly it has been said that we can, of course, go against the highways, and it wouldn't be the first time that this authority has done that. However, you know, we do have a clear responsibility to prevent accidents and to maintain highway safety. So we have to be very cautious about that. One of the things that struck me was the highway report seems to make a point about this being land for agricultural use, as though it's also inferring that there might be vehicles using this that would be of a slow-moving agricultural type, as opposed to a domestic vehicle that, of course, might have greater manoeuvrability, as it were. And I wonder if that was a consideration that you feel that the highway are taking on board. But I have to say, overall, whilst I think we all have sympathy with the applicant and would want to support agricultural and agricultural use, I think our greater responsibility is that of highway safety, particularly if we feel that it's justified. And in this particular instance, that the authority seems to have gone to some length to give very clear instructions and evidence to support that.
Okay,
back on that, Chair, in terms of what the Highway Authority have considered. Yeah, the Highway Authority should consider both forms of traffic. I'm not sure from my own knowledge of the site, all of the types of vehicles that visit this site. It may well be that from time to time people need to pull a trailer, or that we have some sort of small feed lorry visiting the site, but that would be the same, I think, whether the applicant is living there or not, and that's the crux of it in terms of the local highway authority assessment. It's, you know, they can't argue with the fact that there's an agricultural access there serving a general purpose agricultural storage building, but they don't agree with the applicant in terms of the likely future vehicle movements from a typical person living on this site.
Okay, thank you very much, John. Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I did have three questions. Two have already been answered by John. The third one was, do we know if there has been any recorded accidents at that point of access during Natasha's ownership of the property?
It's not been reported in the comments of the local highway authority. If there was an accident record, I would expect them to flag that up in their response to us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next I've got down is Councillor Donnelly.
Thank you, Chair. Well, as a ward member, I mean, it would give me a very heavy heart. I've had to not to support Natasha in this application, but I know the road very, very well. It is quite a busy road, really. The thing that I would think maybe could we not condition, I think that the Councillor Purdy has alluded to, and others, regarding some sort of widening of the access. I know where the bridge is and we can't go that way, but surely if we can go the other way, we like have a wider turning area. Is that not possible? The other thing that puzzles me a little bit is the sustainability and the amount of animals on this patch, really. My question would be, would this area, would this these hectares, would that sustain the actual number of animals that's been proposed for the site? That's not for now, but I'll come back later on. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. My understanding of the site access is that it's, you know, it is a very narrow point. That's what they identified through the planning application, that the amount of land they control where they come out onto Wyaston Road is very limited. So it's not, they don't have the capability of moving it several meters in only one particular direction. And that creates the dilemma really, in that it can only be where it is at the moment, essentially. In terms of, can the land sustain all of the activity that's been identified? I don't have the information before me, I'm afraid, to be able to tell you for definite as to whether all of the activity that's identified in the report happens on this site. I suspect it's spread across the different sites that the applicant controls, but this is the parcel of land that they own, and I think this is, you know, where the main sort of breeding operation that requires supervision is based.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Donnelly. Councillor Ball.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I know we have been concerned about the access and the lights, but obviously, as the speaker said, Natasha said, she travels there 4 or 5 times a day in and out. So wouldn't be living there on the site be less access needed because they're already actually there, rather than travelling them backwards and forwards to that? But the other thing that you was making a point of is the actual opening the floodgates on the issue of a temporary agricultural dwelling. And obviously, because it says temporary, can that not be put down as a condition that it is temporary, and maybe other things could be sorted through this time, because this is a job opportunity, this is agricultural, trying to set up a business and the likes, and you know, I just feel somewhere it's been penalised, and I just wondered if there was some way around it, because it's, you know, it's for the application is for a temporary agricultural workers dwelling. Which bit can we not approve to the fact that we can make it that it is only temporary, contrary to saying that, oh well, they might live there, and well, they're going to live there while they're doing the job, but they'll have to, if they wanted to make a permanent one, they'd have to put in a planning petition. So can you just fully clarify this business about whether we can keep it as a temporary situation?
Yeah, I think my view, and I think this is, you know, echoes the view of the local highway authority, is that the existing use of the access isn't safe, and the proposed use of the access with the establishment of a dwelling on site would also be unsafe in terms of the visibility splays that are available on a road with, you know, sort of 40-mile-an-hour traffic speeds just below the bridge there. In terms of whether you could test that out with a temporary planning permission, I wouldn't advise that you do that. I mean, you can from time to time use temporary planning permissions, but in terms of agricultural workers' dwellings, they're not really there to test whether an access is safe. They're there to see if a business can become established and generate a profit to then justify the future requirement for a permanent dwelling. So the use of temporary planning permissions has to be very carefully thought through. If you conclude, as I have, that this access isn't safe, you know, approving somebody to live there for 3 years wouldn't be appropriate in my view. You'd be risking highway safety.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Bull. Councillor Slack.
Thank you, Chair. Quite a few of my questions have been answered, the access and so forth. I just want to look at another aspect which you spoke about, John, about associated land with this plot. Is there some of this associated land outside of this particular plot? And also, my second question was, when it's an agricultural tie, if it comes to be sold in future, it has to be someone from agriculture and it has to be tested and proven. Is that correct, John?
Yeah, just taking the first question first, Councillor Slack. I'm not sure. I don't have a plan, I don't think, which tells me exactly where the other land that's under the applicant's control lies. It's on tenancy and prospective leases. In terms of controls we would exercise over the dwelling, if you were to support this site, it would be specified that it would be for an agricultural worker. What we wouldn't specify going forward is that the agricultural worker that lived on this site had to be dependent for their agricultural income on this particular unit. So it might be part of a wider agricultural holding, but they may travel to work, in any direction and work as an agricultural worker on other land as well. So, whilst when we consider agricultural workers' dwellings, initially we take on board the arguments that are put about the agricultural activity on that holding, but because agriculture changes over time, the fallback position for agricultural workers' dwellings is that they're not necessarily tied just to that land, but they can be occupied by people involved in wider agricultural activity to make sure they're retained as a source of discounted housing for the agricultural labour market.
Just to come back on if there is adjacent land, if there's an access at a more safer place, for agricultural access at a more safer place, and the land is adjacent to our land, that would be a way it could probably go forward. Maybe.
Well, possibly, but I'm not sure where it is. And, likewise, I think if members went with the officer recommendation tonight, it would be for the applicants to see if there are ways around trying to solve the concern that's expressed in terms of highway safety, whether there's a way of securing control over immediately adjoining land to improve visibility. It would have to be in the southerly direction, and even then I think there are difficult obstacles to overcome.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you very much, Councillor Slack. So I'm going to take one more question, and that's from Richard Bright. Councillor Bright, please.
Thanks, Chair. John, is the applicant allowed any type of structure like a farm office where they could spend the majority of the day and potentially nights if required for animal welfare issues without breaking planning rules? I mean, I feel for them. They have got enough animals if they're all on that land, which I'm sure they're not, because that's quite a lot. They will need to be on that site all through the hours of the night. So if they can't have an agricultural dwelling, even temporary, are they allowed to do that? I mean, a lot of farmers have like a little caravan on site where they can just use as a temporary base as and when they need to stay overnight to do lambing or what have you. Would that be sort of, I know we can't advise them to do that, but are people allowed to do that within the planning laws?
Absolutely, and a lot of agricultural buildings will incorporate some sort of farm office that might have a bed city in or whatever for times when they need to be present on site.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Now we're going to move into debate. Councillor Purdy.
Thank you, Chair. Well, it is with a heavy heart I have to move officers' recommendations for refusal, and I do very much feel for Natasha, but we have to be a responsible planning committee with due regard to highway safety and accept the professionalism of the highway officer. He's obviously looked at this very closely, and there is concern there. It is a fast-moving road, so I think that we've got no choice but to move officers' recommendation for refusal.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Purdy. Councillor Bull.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Well, I'm happy in a sense to second this recommendation. As Councillor Purdy says, we have looked into it and we have got to be sensible as regards the access side of it. And maybe in some form they will be able to go away, and if they have got some bit of land somewhere, that they could find a different form of access and hope that they could come back at a different time. But at the moment, we will go with officer recommendation, and I will second that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ball. Councillor Archer.
Yeah, same sentiment really. A bit of a heavy heart as a farmer's son myself. I would like to be able to vote to help encourage agricultural businesses. In the short term, I'd have very little issue with it. Little or no immediate increase in traffic. I don't think it's a good local business. It's only looking like it's going to be temporary. You could put specifications on to keep it only for use as by the farm manager. But the concerns raised by highways are pretty severe, and it would seem that it is not going to be the right thing to do to approve it at this point, which is a shame. But I think I'm going to have to vote in favour of officers' recommendation here as well. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Councillor Archer. The last on my list is Councillor Slack.
Thank you, Chair. Again, I feel very, very sorry because Natasha's tried to put everything into this and make a business out of it and really trying on, and I do very, very feel sorry. But again, I have to respect the highways and the officers' recommendations, and it does make sense because they come zooming down that road and under that bridge quite fast. Really, it wants highways to really put a speed limit coming through that bridge because they really zoom through there. But that's a different issue. But what Councillor Bright came up with might be an interim, might help out to find a place somewhere, office where they could have a stop overnight, so forth. That might be the way forward at the moment. So I'm very sorry, but I have to go with the officer's recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Slack. The last on my list before we move to the vote is Councillor Donnelly.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Well, again, it's with a very heavy heart that unfortunately I can't support Natasha on this particular occasion. I know the road very well, and I think many of us do that live in that area. Talking with my ex-fire service knowledge, I think it would be very responsible of me tonight to not go with the officer recommendation because it is a dangerous part of the road, and on such time as the applicant come back and probably have a revised application, I think maybe we'd look at it again. I feel sorry that we can't support the agricultural side of the application, but I can't possibly support the actual, or will support the application from the highways point of view, because I think it is quite a dangerous and quite a busy road really. So I'll be supporting the officer.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Donnelly. So now we're going to go to the vote. So it's been moved and seconded for refusal. So now I'll hand over to Jason.
Thank you, Chair. If you could indicate whether you're for, against or abstain. Councillor Archer.
For the recommendation.
Councillor Atkin.
For.
Councillor Bright.
For.
Councillor Bull.
For.
Councillor Burfoot.
For.
Councillor Buttle.
For.
Councillor Donnelly.
For.
Councillor Elliott.
For.
Councillor Fitzherbert.
For.
Councillor Lees.
For.
Councillor Purdy.
For.
Councillor Ratcliffe.
For.
Councillor Slack.
For.
Unanimous, Chair.
Yeah, so that has been refused. So before we move on to the next item of business, what I will do is we'll have a short adjournment for 5 minutes for a comfort break. So if you want to get a coffee and go and use the facilities. So I'll expect you all back at 10 to 8. Is that okay? So just a short adjournment for 5 minutes. Okay, so we'll come back at 10 to 8.
It's a break. So what are they saying up to now? Has Tasha done her bit?
I don't know, because she's stuffed off.
Can they?
Oh,
Finished then.
no, it's just a short break.
Right, members, if we're about ready, can you start coming back online? Thank you very much. I think everybody's back on, so we'll resume the meeting. So thank you very much, one and all. We're now moving on to item 5.3, which is application number 20/00652. It's a full application for Carr Wood House, Rodsley Lane, Yeaveley. I believe I have got one speaker on this, and it's a Mr. John Imber, who's the agent to speak in favour of the application, and you have 5 minutes. So as soon as you've got 30 seconds left, I will indicate that you've got. He seems to have disappeared. Can you find him, Jason?
I'm here, Chair.
Oh, right. Oh, it's all right. I have to flick over a screen to try and find you. So sorry about that. So yes,
No
so you've got 5 minutes as the agent, and I'll indicate when you've got 30 seconds left. So over to you, John.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. I will keep this brief. It's clear from your officer's report that the principle of replacing the existing building on the site with a new property is acceptable. However, it's also clear that there are issues regarding the design of the proposed property and its scale. The applicant understands those concerns and is quite prepared to compromise on the scale and to revisit the design of the proposals. We therefore ask that the committee defer making a decision this evening to give us an opportunity to work with your officers to revise the scheme so that it can be reported back to the committee in a more supportable form. And that's all I'd like to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The first on my list is it's one of Chris's applications. So Chris, sorry, can you introduce it? I'm getting ahead of myself.
I can, Chair. I'll begin by presenting the item. So I've begun to start sharing my screen.
Yeah, we can see it. Thank you very much.
You've already introduced the item. So just for members' benefit, I'm sure because of the history of this site that a lot of members will know the property in question. It's the land and the building which is hatched pink on the plan, which is being projected. This plan is quite useful in that it sets out the existing pattern of development on the southern side of Rodsley Lane. You'll see that it's mainly ribbon development along the southern part of the lane. There are some pockets of former farm buildings that have been converted. But as you'll note from the officer's report, dwellings are relatively modest and sit within modest curtilages in this location. Now, Shedley Manor is relatively unique because it's a property that was concealed within an agricultural building. Now, this was back in 2006 when the dwelling was revealed and a certificate submitted for to demonstrate continuous existing use and development. And that was accepted by the local authority. So the use of the building as a dwelling house is lawful, and it was before the concealment legislation came out and all the case law on that issue materialised. So the use of the building as a dwelling house is lawful. We are, as the agents previously mentioned, we are generally supportive of the replacement of what's there in principle, and our local plan policies do support the replacement of buildings that don't have a positive impact on their surroundings. Now, you'll note from the plan that's before you that the site includes quite a significant area of land. Now, the application is before members because it's technically a major application because it's over a hectare in size. It's 1.1 hectare in area, so it's quite a big area, and I think that plan indicates that relatively well. So that's a red line plan, again showing the extent of the site and the buildings on site. And this is an indication of the footprint of the proposed dwelling. So you'll see it has quite a big footprint which occupies the same part or a similar part of the site and extends beyond that existing footprint. Again, you can see a plan, an existing block plan, which shows the position of the existing buildings on site. Just going back to the image before, you see broadly in the same location, but slightly larger in footprint terms. Now, in terms of the design of the replacement dwelling, it does follow a traditional farmhouse, country farmhouse style. You'll note from the officer's report that there's concerns about the proportions of it and some of the architectural detailing. So I'll move on to the next image. So this is the principal elevation. And if we just go back a few slides, so this is the elevation, the northwest facing elevation. So facing this sort of turning circle in front of the building, this formal sort of access arrangement and the access onto Rodsley Lane. So that's the elevation you'd see from the access. Based on the height of the building to eaves, it's considered to be an over-wide building, and it incorporates a faceted glazed central dormer window, which we feel is a contemporary and incongruous detail to the property. It's also overly wide in our opinion. The porch, again, is overly wide. It can include sort of formal detailing such as the bays and the the plinth detail, which is considered to be, again, overly formal, an incongruous element. At the rear, you've got this semicircular projecting element, which is primarily glazed. And the extent of buildings on site, I mean, this plan shows the full extent of the property. Now, the applicant has proposed to replace the dwelling in broadly the same location as the existing building. That existing building is derived from a former agricultural building, so it sits in a functional or a sensible location on the site in relation to that former use of it, but it doesn't respond positively to the character of the area in terms of it being a new residential dwelling, because it sits relatively centrally within the site. It's a much bigger property than the nearby properties, and it's extremely prominent and visible from its surroundings. That gives you an idea as to the rear of the building. You've got on either side, you've got garage buildings. This is a building with a games room above and a 4-bay garage underneath. On the other side, you've got a garage that can accommodate up to 10 vehicles, and again, accommodation above that. And this plan gives you an idea as to the full extent of accommodation. So, although it's only a 5-bedroom property, the overall footprint of the building and the amount of accommodation is quite excessive in officers' opinion. So to give you an idea as to views of the building, this is a diagram of the photographs that have been taken and which views they're taken from. So this is the existing tree-lined access to the existing building. You can see here where the dwelling house that was concealed reveals itself behind what was profiled steel sheeting. You see formal detail of it with coins, brickwork and render, stone window surrounds, and you can see obviously the removal of some of the cladding to its elevation. Here we've got the gable end of the building facing out onto countryside. And you see the same red brick and render detail with formal coins and stone window surrounds. Some of the existing cladding remains on the side elevation there. It's a particularly blurry photo, but that's the other side of the building. A separate freestanding garage building. And there's recognition. Sorry, a little bit of interference there. There's recognition in the report that the building doesn't we aren't opposed to principle. This is a view of the building looking from the west, looking in an easterly direction. And then we've got a view from the public footpath to the east of the site. You can see here, in terms of views of the existing building, you just get a view of the existing roof. So that brings me to the end of the presentation. The agent has offered up the idea of deferring the items, consider the proposal afresh and look at changing perhaps the siting of the dwelling, revisiting its design and the scale. Now, the local planning authority's practice is only to negotiate minor improvements to applications in order to add value to them. And the issue we have is that amendments that are required to make a proposal that's otherwise regarded as unacceptable should be established at the pre-application stage, so as not to undermine this process and ensure timely decision making as well. We've got to think there is some public interest in this application, and we feel that we should be issuing a decision on this current application. The applicant has an opportunity to utilise a free go should they wish through the submission of an application of similar nature and description. They're able to do that. They're able to appeal the decision at the same time, or they could appeal the decision. They could enter into pre-application discussions with us, and then with a view to submitting a new application utilising a free go. And that would be a better way forward, because the degree of changes necessary to make this development acceptable to officers would require a completely different development. We'd have to carry out full reconsultation, and we need to make sure that we're being fully transparent and we are assessing the application as submitted without seeking fundamental and significant changes to it. Happy to take questions at this stage.
Thank you very much, Chris. The first person I've got on my list is Councillor Purdy.
Thank you, Chair. Probably jumping ahead of myself with the applicant agent asking for deferral, but listening to what Chris has just said, I would ask Chris if he could repeat, please, for the benefit of the committee. Are you saying it's better, Chris, that this is determined rather than deferred?
I just think in terms of ensuring timely decision making, and also to ensure that the decision we make is fully transparent and it doesn't undermine the pre-application advice service that we offer. What we're saying here is the changes necessary to make this development acceptable are significant and would require full reconsultation and publicity to be carried out. And the problem we have is that there's no guarantee that through negotiation we'll be able to come up with a scheme that we're able to support as officers. And I think although we're hopeful that we can reach that position, we need to be making a decision on this current application. The applicant has an option to utilise a free go, submit another application of similar nature and description. So not prejudiced by that decision. There's a mark in the sand in terms of this development not being acceptable, and they've got at the same time an option to enter into pre-application discussions with us ahead of submitting a new application.
Thank you, Chris. I think we're back to you then, Square One, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Purdy. Councillor Bull?
Yes, I like Councillor Purdy was jumping the gun saying that, well, if that was the offer, but obviously upon the recommendations from officer to state that this should be looked over and given an opinion upon, then obviously I will leave this till anybody else has any more questions to put forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bull. Councillor Slack?
Thank you, Chair. Have they had planning advice, Chris? It doesn't look like they've had to building this design.
I can clarify, Councillor, no, that no pre-application advice was sought prior to the submission of this current application.
Right, yeah, I thought not, yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Slack. I've got nobody else down for questions, so I'll move into debate. Councillor Bull?
Then I think obviously from the advice that we've been given, and we can understand that it's the fact of it is an overlarge development that just doesn't fit in at all, that we go with officers' recommended refusal and give the opportunity for the clients to go back to do the pre-application as stated by the officer.
So are you moving it for refusal?
I will move to refusal. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Bull. Councillor Slack?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, again, I'll second this, Chair, because obviously he's not had pre-planning advice. He's gone against, officers that are recommended smaller buildings. So yes, obviously he's gone against what we all believe in should things work. So I'll gladly second this.
Thank you very much, Councillor Slack. The last person I've got on my list is Councillor Donnelly, and then we'll move to the vote.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I was going to second it. Again, I think yes. I think the officers have definitely got it right, and I think it should go back to the drawing board. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Donnelly. So it's been moved and seconded for refusal. I'll now go to Jason for the vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. If members could indicate whether they're for, against or abstain. Councillor Archer.
For.
Councillor Atkin.
For.
Councillor Bright.
For.
Councillor Bull.
For.
Councillor Burfoot.
For.
Councillor Buttle.
For.
Councillor Donnelly.
For.
Councillor Elliott.
For.
Councillor Fitzherbert.
For.
Councillor Lees.
For.
Councillor Purdy.
For.
Councillor Ratcliffe.
For.
Councillor Slack.
For.
It's unanimous, Chair.
That's been refused. So moving swiftly on to item 5.4. This is application number 20/00714 It's the old coal yard, Watery Lane, Clifton. I have one speaker down, and again, it's John Imber, who's the agent. So you have 5 minutes to speak, and I'll indicate when you've got 30 seconds left. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Chairman. If there are no objectors speaking tonight, and I will keep this brief, your officer's report clearly sets out the planning balance and arrives at a positive recommendation, which we welcome. I'd just like to reiterate that the buildings to be used for purposes related to the existing and established storage use at the site, and on that basis, there will be no material increase in traffic or noise and disturbance. Thank you for your time.
Okay.
That is the quickest speech by an agent I've ever heard in the planning committee. So thank you very much for being succinct about it. So now we'll move over to the officer to present it. That's Chris again.
Thank you, Chair. You've already introduced the item, so we'll just begin by going through the presentation. But before I do that, actually, just to point members in the direction of the public participation and late representation sheet, you'll know that there is an item there for consideration, and officers have responded to that. So just draw members' attention to that late representation sheet. Members will be familiar with the site. It's the coal yard site at Clifton, which is hatched pink on this particular plan. The site contains an existing storage building, which is outlined in black on that plan just above the coal yard name tag. And the application is for a storage building right at the southwestern corner of the site, outlined in red on this particular drawing. Now, this gives you an idea as to the size of the building, which is set out in the application documents. The original proposal was for 2 units of new storage and distribution use units, and the applicant has since agreed to amend the application so that the storage and distribution is associated with the existing coal yard activity, so the established use of the site as a coal yard. And you'll see as we come on to the photographs later on in the presentation, and the diagram of where the photographs were taken. We've got the access into the site, you've got palisade fence surrounding it. You can see this at the moment, you see some storage containers. Those are associated with the existing use beyond the application site. You can see in the foreground to those containers, there is the palisade fence, which represents the extremities of the site. But you can see the open storage of coal. We've got mounds of coal here. We've got a vehicle stored outside. Again, some more coal stored outside. We've got packaged coal on pallets. We've got Calor gas cylinders stored outside, and we've got the existing storage building or a workshop building just beyond. And a more close-up image of that particular building. And that brings me to the end of the presentation. We're generally satisfied that the use of the building in association with the established and existing use of the site as a coal yard is acceptable. Policies and local plans support the expansion of existing businesses. We don't feel that the use of the site for such purposes or the building on site will result in any intensification or significant intensification of the access. It's unlikely to result in a significant nuisance to residents, and therefore we are recommending approval of the application. You'll note the comments from the consultees and the Highway Authority. They don't raise objections to the ancillary use of the building by the current operators. You also note there's quite stringent condition on the officer's report, which restricts the use to the current operator and to no other persons wishing to run a business from the site. So it would be closely linked to that use and the existing operator. Happy to take questions at this stage.
Well, thank you very much, Chris. Councillor Archer.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to comment to debate later, but just one quick question for now. I think that the crucial element to this application in terms of the residents of Clifton, of which I am a resident of Clifton, so I know the site very well, even though it's not in my ward, is to do with the conditions and the use. I'll talk more about that in debate, but the question is, I do acknowledge that the conditions do look quite tight, but how can we be assured that they will be enforced and this is going to be monitored, that it is only used for existing use? And secondly to that, is there any way the conditions can specify anything to do with the nature of vehicles? It's not just to do with the potential of any increase in the numbers of vehicles in this area, but the nature of the road and the access to the road is very tight at both ends, and it's not suitable for larger vehicles at all, HGVs, long vehicles, towing vehicles, those sorts of vehicles. Is there any way that we can adapt and tighten up the conditions even further to ensure that those types of vehicles are not going to be using this site as a result of this application? Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Archer. Just to come back on that point, when imposing conditions, they have to meet certain tests, and they have to be necessary in order to make the development acceptable. Now, we've got to bear in mind that there's an existing lawful use of the site as a coal yard. Delivery vehicles, this is an outside storage area, and delivery vehicles can already access the site in association with such use. What we're saying is there are unlikely to be any significant intensification of that use derived from the erection of a building of this size on the site. Therefore, in my view, it wouldn't be reasonable to impose a condition on the back of this application, which is just for the storage building, to control vehicles, movements and the size of vehicles that are able to access the site currently without restriction.
Okay, thank you very much, Chris. I've got nobody else down for questions, so we'll move straight into debate. Councillor Archer.
Thank you, Chair. I think the fact there's been few questions and perhaps is testament to the fact that there's not a lot wrong with this as a planning application. But I think it's important to understand the context here. That I think the reason that there's been local concern raised about this relates back to a previous issue in terms of the potential traveller site here. And that did introduce a level of distrust amongst the local community. And I think it's really important that we are mindful of that, and that the main reason for that concern was there were concerns that if there was a traveller site approved here, it would result in significant increase in traffic. And although the photographs show the access to the site itself, which is fine in terms of access of larger vehicles, what it doesn't show, and people who don't know the area, is Watery Lane, which is the lane that gives access to the site at both ends, is very, very tight. It's one goes into the centre of the village and is closed on both sides, and the other has got houses right up to the edge on both sides of the junction to the busy Ashbourne to Leek Road. And the houses at that end have actually already been hit and damaged by vehicles turning in there. There's parked cars down there on either side of the road because there's houses there with no parking. So when you look at it just in isolation, it looks okay. And I'm not going to say I'm going to vote against it because I think there's no particularly good planning reason to vote against it. But I think the conditions are absolutely crucial, and it's really important that we watch the site carefully because it would not be fair on local residents to have an increase, particularly in large vehicles, longer vehicles. This is not a suitable road for that type of vehicle, and the access to this road is not at all suitable for that type of vehicle. And we just need to make sure that these conditions are very tightly enforced. Other than that, I'm happy to support it in principle, but I think it's important we understand that context and therefore watch this situation closely and make sure we enforce the conditions that we're putting in place. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Archer. Councillor Donnelly.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, again, as I know the area quite well, really, I think that the application is a very sound one, and I think it's something that needs something like that to tidy it up and also put into very good use. So I'm very happy to move the application.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Donnelly. Councillor Fitzherbert.
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, once again, this is the problem, like the last one, though I didn't mention it, the problem of no site visits and seeing the actual things that we're discussing. It's so difficult to gauge the site and this particular site if you've never been there before, even how good, even if you've got really good photographs as well. And you know, I really do wish and pray and hope that we can get back to normal and visit these things and, you know, and look at those issues on site, which clear the whole thing. You know, I'm very fond of Clifton for family reasons, and I'm happy to support this local business, and I'm happy to second the motion.
Thank you very much, Councillor Fitzherbert. Councillor Purdy.
My point's been covered, thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much. I've got nobody else down on my list, so it's been moved and seconded for planning permission being granted subject to conditions. So now we'll go to the vote. Jason.
Chair, if members could indicate whether they're for, against or abstain. Councillor Archer.
For.
Councillor Atkin.
For.
Councillor Bright.
For.
Councillor Bull.
For.
Councillor Burford.
For.
Councillor Buckle.
For.
Councillor Donnelly.
For.
Councillor Elliott.
For.
Councillor Fitzherbert.
For.
Councillor Lees.
For.
Councillor Purdy.
For.
Councillor Ratcliffe.
For.
Councillor Slack.
For.
I believe that has been carried unanimously, so the permission has been granted. Thank you very much. Moving swiftly on, this is the last thing for determination, apart from a bit of housekeeping at the end. So now moving on to item 5.5. This is application number 20/00803. It's the variation of condition. It's the Mount 4 North Avenue, Ashbourne. So we have no speakers down on the list, so I'll hand straight over to the officer, which is Chris again.
Thank you, Chair. Just to present this item to you, what it involves. It's essentially a section 73 application to substitute approved drawings. And in this particular case, it's the approved landscaping drawings for the site. The site is building with formerly the mount attached in pink on the plan that's currently being projected. It's a development now of executive apartments, which is nearing completion. You can see on this plan here, there are a number of trees, some of which are protected by tree preservation order, and this building generally occupies a similar position to the original building. It's a much larger building in footprint terms and its relationship to the road, and you'll see that from the supporting photographs. And what this application essentially proposes to do is to realign a section of roadside wall behind a plant, what was shown on this plan as a planted margin. So you'll see where you can see the alignment of the original wall at the northern end of the site with North Avenue, and you can see pedestrian access and a return in the wall at that point. So the proposal is to set the wall back at that point, so to have a return at that position, because it's logical in terms of the access, the pedestrian access to the site, and then also to have the wall realigned all the way along the southern part of the site, again where the wall abuts the boundary with North Avenue, and until it gets to a protected line right at the southern boundary of the site. And the proposal there is for a rail around the canopy of that particular tree. Now, members who know this site will know that the original wall was a prominent and important feature of the existing street. The line was pushing against the wall, causing damage to it, and that section of wall has been removed, and the wall has been erected in its new alignment. You can see here you've got an elevation or a street view perspective of the wall. So the proposal is to retain it at its original height. It will just be set back a modest distance behind the existing carriageway footpath, and you can see it extends beyond the extremities of the building up to the protected line where a rail is proposed, which will arc around the tree beyond its canopy. Now I've got photographs of the work, so you can see here the new wall being constructed and the modest gap between the pedestrian or the footpath edge and the new wall. Officer's view, as you can see from the report, is that the new section of wall still provides quite a strong sense of enclosure to the street. We feel that it's an appropriate response to the character. It's not unduly harmful in the street scene or to the character and identity of this part of Ashbourne, and therefore recommending approval. The tree officers looked at the proposal, and with the amended plans which show the railing around the protected tree, they're satisfied there'll be no undue harm to that tree, and will probably be an improvement on the original situation where the tree was pushing out the original wall. Another thing to bear in mind is that we have agreed to a new brick being introduced. The brick is a very close match to the original brick wall, but by having the return, that creates a visual break between the new section of wall and the new brick and the old brick. If the wall was to be on its original alignment, there might have been a requirement to key in the existing brickwork, but having the return means that we don't have that requirement. It will provide a natural visual break to the new and old sections of wall. So we've got a picture there of the new section of wall being built under construction. That's sort of a head-on or direct view looking at it. And there you can see the section of wall that will need to be removed to where the return will be created, but it's where the old wall will meet the new. And that brings me to the end of the presentation. Happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Chris. Councillor Bull.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I don't think I'm going to participate anymore within this because I have made lots of comments about this actual application from the word go, and I feel that I don't give just cause for how I could give a result to this. So I'm going to withdraw from taking any more part within this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Ball. Councillor Lees.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This site's got quite a bit of history, as we know. Have we got any pictures of this existing lime tree? Because from a tree preservation point of view, what I see, the ground has been dug all around this lime tree, and the wall that we're looking at now is, when I've been past today, is very much close on complete, and it hasn't even got planning yet. So it's a very sore point within the residents of North Avenue that they keep doing work that is unauthorised, and even today there's vehicles parked on the road. It's chaos up there, and it's and I think this tree's been exposed already, and and I don't think the pictures you've got on the photograph are relative to what has actually happened now.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Lees. I've got Richard Fitzherbert next.
Yeah, can we go back to seeing people, or are we looking at this photo? I just like to ask, really, my question is, I went and visited site today and had a good look at this wall. It seems like we've had bin gate earlier, now we've got wall gate. Is the existing wall going to be knocked down, or does the new wall that has been started meet or join up with the gap, the old wall? I'm still a little bit confused. I'm terribly sorry to be thick about this.
Councillor Fitzherbert, I'll share my screen again, just so you can see what's proposed. So the plan on the screen, if you can see, obviously North Avenue on the west hand, to the west of that, or left hand side of that particular plan, you can see a pedestrian access point where there's a return in the wall. So the wall to the north of that pedestrian access constitutes the original wall, so that's being retained on its original alignment. So roughly speaking, it's probably about 40% of the original wall. So at that point, you can see the return of the new section of wall, which will be new brickwork, although it'll be a complementary brick to the original wall. And then you've got the new section, which is set back a greater distance from the carriage or the public footpath. And the original proposal was to have it to have like a planted margin between the footpath edge and the wall. However, a preference has been expressed for that to form a wider pavement in that location. Because there's street furniture, there's a street light and a telegraph pole, that will also need to be set back, and you'll note that there's a condition to require that to happen, because what we don't want is street furniture floating in the middle of the pavement that people could potentially walk into. So that will need to be resolved and dealt with before any of these new apartments are occupied. But I hope that plan just sets out the amount of new wall and its position relative to the original wall.
Okay, so if I may, Chairman, it's quite a lot of extra work, and to move that big pole. I mean, looking at the photograph I took today, that's quite a big pole to one. I suppose there's two things, but it's quite a lot of extra work that has sort of happened, and you've sort of noticed it's happening. And you know, I do feel for the local residents that this was never in the original plan.
Chris, do you want to come back on that?
I think it was just a comment, really. I don't think there's a question there to answer. I think Councillor Fitzherbert was just expressing some sympathy for existing residents, which is fair enough. I mean, those comments were understood.
It's probably me being thick, Chris. So the next on my list is Councillor Archer.
Thank you, Chair. Well, first question is sort of why? Why are they bothering moving the line of the wall? What's the actual thinking behind it? What's the reasoning behind it? And the second question, Chris, you mentioned that we'd given permission for a new brick to be used. I've been and had a look at it myself, and I'm not entirely happy that the new brick is a great. I think it does change quite significantly the sort of look of the street frontage there. And also, if we have given permission for new type of brick to be used, but apparently we haven't given permission for the wall to be built. It's just someone, can you explain to me how that's able to happen? That yes, we've approved the brick, but no, we haven't approved the wall, yet they've started to build it anyway. And also, just why are they wanting to do this when they've got to move street furniture and so on as a result? Thanks.
My understanding of what's happened is that you can't really see beyond this particular image that I'm sharing at the moment, but the levels on site are such there's a basement level to this particular property, and there's a difference in ground levels beyond the wall. So there's a need for a retaining structure beyond that wall that you can't see on that image. And it was logical to the developer, I understand, to build the wall on that alignment because you'd have a retaining wall and a space immediately behind it, which would be useless to them. So what they've decided to do is build the wall in that position, utilising that existing retaining structure. And they've done it at their own risk. They were advised that they need to apply for planning permission, they need to substitute the approved drawings because it wasn't an approved detail. Officers have never given them any green light to carry out the works, and we can't stop or prevent developers from doing work. They just do it at their own risk. They've submitted an application and they deem that risk to be relatively minimal because the impact on the environment isn't significant in their view, is the only assumption I can make on that. In terms of the brick, I think it's a reasonably close match. I mean, it obviously matches the brickwork used in the construction of the existing property. But I think the brick, because there is a return in the wall and there is a transition between the materials, there's only a very subtle difference in my view on the colours of the brick, and it needs time to weather. But I think having the return and having that visual break and that in the wall, I think that does help with the integration of the new material with the old.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Donnelly.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Well, yesterday I went up and had a look at this wall again. Not been past there for quite a while, but to be honest, it didn't appeal to me at all, really. I mean, all I could say personally, if Councillor Lees had built me that wall, I'd have sacked him. My comment.
Thank you very much, Councillor Donnelly. Councillor Buttle.
Yeah, I've also been visiting. It's obviously they've had a trail of councillors wandering past. I don't really mind the wall. I kind of mind them building it without asking, but you know, like they don't have to ask, so it's kind of none of my business in a way. Well, it is my business, but you know, like my business is whether or not they need to put it back, isn't it? Basically, where it was originally. I'm just checking. That's what we're asking here: is do we tell them to move that wall? That was the question.
Yeah, I think if members were minded to go against officer recommendation, what would happen is the developer would have a right of appeal against the decision that we issued. And I'd have thought they'd exercise that right before we'd be in a position where we'd be negotiating them having to rebuild it in its original position. We'd have to serve a notice as well to require an enforcement notice to require them to rebuild or to build the wall in its correct location. And it has implications for the completion of developments as well. I mean, that I'd have to revisit the original conditions, but I'm sure there's a requirement for that wall to be built as per the approved drawings prior to occupation of the apartment. So if members were to go against officer recommendation, it could have implications on the occupation of those units and the completion of the development.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor
Hang on.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry about that. Yeah, well, yeah, that does make sense. So we're not deciding that. We're actually deciding that the wall's okay where it is. That's the decision that we're making, and it's fine with me. Now, I'm really worried about the tree, though. The tree preservation officer, I've read the bits and bobs. What are they going to do with that exposed earth? It's standing up, what, 3'6", 4 foot above the level of the pavement. What's going to stop it, you know, like blowing over? What is it that's holding that tree there now that it's up in the air? And if there is, you know, like a bit of railing round the back, that's not going to maintain the tree in its place, is it? So what are we going to do about the what we're going to ask, or what are they going to do about the exposed roots or the exposed raised up area?
Yeah, the stability of the tree. I mean, the original section of wall that was bowing out around the tree has now been removed. So the tree is self-supporting, if you like, and the tree officer has been out to this site on numerous occasions and has advised on construction methods and the construction activity in and around the trees and ground levels and everything else. They're satisfied that the tree that the well-being of the tree is acceptable, and they're also satisfied that the boundary treatment around it won't cause damage to the tree. So we have to trust that the tree officer has carried out a full and proper assessment of that tree and concluded that the development isn't going to result in any undue harm. It currently stands on the site without any support from any structure or anything that would ensure its future stability.
So are we going to have a big earthy mound in the middle of the end of this widened pavement? Is that what's going to happen?
Because the tree's protected, any significant earthworks around the tree will need to be agreed with the tree officer. And I think it'd be sensible for the developer, in terms of their intentions, they might think, well, actually the stability of the tree is fine, we're happy to just leave it as it is. But I thought it'd be good practice to discuss any proposals for any earth move being brought onto the site is agreed with the tree officer beforehand, and before any new railing is erected around the canopy of the tree also. So I'd have thought those discussions would take place, but the tree officer does go out regularly anyway to inspect the site, so it's discussion that they could have when they're next on site in terms of how that detail's dealt with.
So we're confident that the tree is safe?
Well, it'd be no worse. It'd be no worsely affected by the development than what it's.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Butler. Being as we've reached the witching hour of 2.5 hours, I need a proposal to extend the meeting. So, Councillor Donnelly, are you proposing it? Councillor Fitzherbert, second. All those in favour, please show. So, we're just moving on with the meeting. So, the next on my list is Councillor Lees.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Chris, have you got any photos of this tree that's Councillor Buttle's just been on about? Because I am very concerned about this tree, because it hasn't just been exposed on the roadside, on the wall side. It stands literally 3 foot out of the ground. All the grounds have been exposed around it. The roots have been chopped, and you know, any other TPO, you can't go near a tree, and that's been exposed. Have we got any up-to-date photos of this tree as it is now?
Yes, I have been to site recently. Unfortunately, the photos taken do not show the tree in question, but the tree officer has also visited the site in the last month or so. So it's a site that we regularly visit. I've seen the tree officer has seen the tree, and if members are concerned about its future well-being, then obviously that's something that the tree officer can reflect on, and when he next visits the site, he can look at the ground levels and conditions around that tree in order to ensure that it's not unduly harmed by the development. But the position of the tree and the works that have already been carried out have exposed the roots of the trees in areas, and you've pointed out some potential damage. That damage will have been assessed and inspected by the tree officer. He hasn't raised any concerns to me directly, but it doesn't mean that in looking at this development and monitoring trees on site that he might raise that as an issue going forward. But this application is just to carry out development around the tree, and we're satisfied that that development won't cause any additional harm.
Can I come back, please, Chair?
Of course you can, Stuart.
Yeah, I was there this morning looking at this site and this tree, and there's a great big excavator perched right against the side of the tree, digging away, doing the new entrance. And like I say, it's exposed all the ground around it. And like Councillor Butler's expressed, you know, this tree is standing out 3 foot out of the ground now. Thank you.
Chris, is that something we can get the tree officer to go back out and have a look at before, you know, and try and make it more regularised, because I know it's got a TPO on it, but I think, you know, what the committee has raised is there might be serious harm to this tree. And if we get the assurance from officers that it will be looked at regularly while this building is being taken place, I think we ought to do that. Is that something we can do?
I think John might want to come in, but we can certainly take a message away from any decision that's made that members are concerned about the well-being of that tree. And Chris does routinely go out and visit the development sites around the district, so it's something he can certainly look at.
Yeah. John, do you want to come in, John?
Yeah, I'll come in on this point. I think members have raised a very legitimate concern, and obviously quite a number of you have taken the time to go and visit the site. And the tree is a very attractive specimen that contributes to the street scene. I think that's quite separate from the consideration of the planning application that you've got before you. The boundary wall is something that you can consider in isolation. It doesn't have a direct impact on the tree itself, and leave it to the tree officer under my instruction to go and visit the site tomorrow to ensure that works on the site aren't further jeopardising the health of that mature, attractive specimen.
Thank you, John. Does that found some sort of consensus around the committee that John will get the officer to go out again? Does that satisfy you, Councillor Lees?
Yes, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ratcliffe.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. I do sympathise with the statements about this TPO tree, because I had something similar in my own ward with the excavation work taking place very close to a TPO tree, which eventually had to be felled because it came into a dangerous state. And I think it's right and proper that we take action at this stage and not wait for that to occur. But I have a question, if I may, that has come into my mind about your point, Chris, about the street furniture and the movement of it to be set back immediately in front of the wall. It occurs to me that you've got two separate authorities involved here. The street light itself comes under the county council. The telegraph pole presumably is under British Telecom or Outreach or someone like that. What's the guarantee that both of them, of course, are going to agree to these works, which no doubt will cost them money unless that finance is coming from the developer. And then, of course, what I don't read, or I wanted just to hear your thoughts, is have you got a time scale on this? Because it seems to me, again, with the county council and the street light, it's likely to be a fairly low priority given what they're involved in at the moment.
Yes, just come back on those points. The Highway Authority have indicated that there'll be a requirement for the street light to be set back, and they've expressed a preference for the footpath width to be widened and not have a planted margin. So there is support from the Highway Authority. The developer's committed to removing both the lamp post and the telegraph pole, and we've imposed a condition. So in terms of timescales, there's a condition that those works must happen before any of these apartments are occupied. And you can see from the photographs that the development is nearing completion. So it's in the applicant's interest to agree those works and get those works approved and the works done within a timely manner.
Jason, you're on mute.
Sorry, it's just force of habit of shutting me. So are you quite happy with that, Mike? Do you want a supplementary or are you happy? If not, I'll move on to Councillor Slack then.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, to echo Mike's, the one at Wood Street, they just, a similar thing really. They just kept going and going, the contractor, and destroyed the tree eventually. I think we've got really to step on these people when they're doing this. The PTOs aren't there they put there for reasons, aren't they, to protect the tree, and they disregard it. They think a tree's just in their way. So I think we've got really to step on these people. In regard, looking at the footpath, another issue, is it slightly wider now, the footpath now than what it were previously?
It will be wider. I mean, you've got to think at the moment, the final surface hasn't been laid. So what you're left with is a little bit of a margin, an unfinished margin between the original footpath edge and the wall. But once the new surface is laid, ultimately what you'll be left with is a wider footpath on the section of the site where the wall will be set back behind the original.
Because it is very tight up there into the footpaths and that, so it will be a slightly road safety improvement on the footpath.
It'll be a wider footpath.
Yeah. Thank you, Chris.
Chair, you're muted again.
Sorry, now we're moving to debate. Does anyone want to set off debate? Oh, we've got two already. Councillor Lees and then Councillor Archer.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Unfortunately, I'm not happy to support this motion due to the fact I think it spoils the street scene. I think they're already contravening the planning conditions that you're proposing to impose. Planning condition 11, 13, 14, 15, they're already being breached before we even debate this application. So I'm not happy to support it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Lees. Councillor Archer.
Thank you, Chair. I agree largely with what Councillor Lees has said. It's a difficult one, this, because on the one hand, I do trust Chris, and I suspect if we go against recommendation, it's likely to be overturned at appeal. So I'm inclined to go along with the recommendation. However, I can't really vote for it. I think I'm likely to abstain as things stand, because the impact on the street scene, I completely agree with Councillor Lees, is not positive. I don't think the wall adds anything positive at all to the view to the street scene. I have got a photograph in front of me of the tree, which I took while I was up there the other day, and the excavation literally is within a foot or two of the exposed roots of the tree, and I have big concerns about the tree. And again, although I'll trust what Chris says about the tree preservation officer, the developers have not taken enough care with that. When they do build this wall, my understanding is it will have a direct impact on the tree, because by taking the wall back, it's taking it closer to the tree. I understand it to be that way. Please correct me if I'm wrong. And therefore, that is also a big concern. So I'm very much towards, I don't want to put the council, the district in a position whereby they go to appeal and lose. But I do think this developer's taken liberties. They've upset local residents. They've built the wall without checking first. It does not add into the street scene, and they put the street at risk. So I really do think that we as a district need to consider this when considering developers in the future, and ensuring that we monitor developers properly, because I don't think this has been a positive experience for local residents at all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Archer. Councillor Donnelly.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, well, like Councillor Lees, unfortunately, I can't support it either, because I remember the old wall was in. I think it's, instead to say this replicates that, I don't think it does. I think that more care should have been taken with the whole application. There's been a lot of ongoing issues up there for many, many moons, and there's no way can I support this application. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Donnelly. I've got nobody else on my list, so what I'm looking for now is somebody to move a recommendation. Councillor Fitzherbert.
Thank you. Well, I did look at the wall today, Chairman, and I have got a lot of sympathy with the Ashbourne ward members as well. Fun enough, I agree with Councillor Battle that the widening of the footpath is right, but it is really naughty of all these people to do it without consent or consulting everyone and upsetting everyone. And I'm not fully aware of all the whys and wherefores of this particular project, but I don't think the actual application originally came before this committee. Well, if it did, I missed that particular planning meeting, but I'm going to reluctantly move this because I think the officers have come to probably the only reasonable solution, and I'm really sorry for the people of Ashbourne, but I'm going to move it and see where we go.
Thank you very much, Councillor Fitzherbert. So now what I'm looking for is somebody to second the application. Anybody from the committee willing to do that?
I'll second the application.
So Councillor Slack has seconded it.
Yeah.
I've got nobody else down on my list, so it's moved and seconded that the application be granted subject to conditions. So, Jason, if we can go to the vote, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just a reminder that Councillor Bull has said that she won't be participating in this item. You could indicate whether you're for, against, or abstain. Councillor Archer.
Abstain.
Councillor Atkin.
For.
Councillor Bright.
I think Councillor Bright has left the meeting.
Gone, right. Councillor Burford.
You there, Sue?
Sorry, against.
Councillor Buttle.
Abstain.
Councillor Donnelly.
Against.
Councillor Elliott.
For.
Councillor Fitzherbert.
For.
Councillor Lees.
Against.
Councillor Purdy.
For.
Councillor Ratcliffe.
Abstain.
And Councillor Slack.
For.
5 for, 3 against, and 3 abstentions.
So the motion has been carried, so that the application has been granted. Okay, thank you very much, committee members. Now just a little bit of quick housekeeping. So we'll now move on to information and active and closed enforcement investigations. John, is there anything anything you want to add, or any committee member? And I've got Councillor Bull, I believe.
Council, can I come in, Chair?
Of course you can, yes.
Thank you. Yes, well, obviously the last item that we've been on, I've been led to believe, as I've talked to John many times over this development that's been going on due to the fact of having complaints from many residents. And I am in belief that this is supposed to be still as an active enforcement case, but I don't actually see it on the enforcement case list. And could I ask why?
Of course you can, yeah. John, Chris?
Well, perhaps I should take that, and Chris, feel free to add to that. I wasn't aware actually that we'd actively decided not to pursue this any further. Members will in the future be copied in on a recent report from the Ombudsman about enforcement on this particular site. I don't want to sort of share all of the ins and outs of that, but we do need to bring the enforcement issue on this site to some sort of conclusion. But I hadn't realised that we got to that point just yet. We were still in discussions with Kerry on it, so I'll make inquiries tomorrow as to quite why it's no longer on the list at this time.
Okay, thank you very much. Anybody else want to add anything to the enforcement list? No? In which case, move swiftly on to the next item, which is the Planning Appeals Progress Report. Is any member wishing to speak against this, or John or Chris want to make any comments?
Nothing to add from my perspective, Chair.
No, and I do see from the list all the appeals have been dismissed. So thank you very much, committee members. Thank you for your forbearance in quite a long meeting, and thank you very much, Councillor Ratcliffe, for gracing us with your presence once more. Thank you very much, and I will see you all at the next meeting of the Planning Committee and the next full council meeting later on in the month. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Good night, everybody.
Thank you.